You hear Viking and think horned helmets and heroic raids. Almost nobody talks about the women. The ones traded like livestock in Dublin and Hedeby. The ones taken for unpaid grain. The ones buried without names after their masters died. Slaves make up maybe 10% of Viking Scandinavia. Some captured, some born into it, and some handed over because a family owed silver they could never pay back. What happens when you become property to clear a debt? Where do you end up? And when they finally put you in the ground, what does that grave tell us? From 800 to 1050, Thrall's power the Norse world. Every longship sail needs 5 years of one woman's work to weave. Wool production explodes, new pastures swallow forests, someone has to tend those sheep, someone has to work that loom. Neil Price at Uppsala University lays it out clean. The labor comes from captured bodies moved across the Baltic and the Irish Sea. Written sources spell it out. 821, the Annals of Ulster record a raid near Dublin. They carry off a great number of women. 977. The Arab geographer Ibn Hawqal writes about a Viking slave trade stretching from Spain to Egypt. The scale stuns. Conservative estimates place slaves at 10% of Viking age Scandinavia's population. Some historians push it to 25%. That's 1 in 4 people. Walk through Burka in 900. You see thralls everywhere, hauling water, splitting wood, working looms in doorways, following masters to the harbor. The infrastructure sits in 3 major trading hubs. Dublin, on Ireland's east coast. Hedeby, where Denmark controls the passage between North Sea and Baltic. Burka, on Björkö Island in Lake Mälaren, Sweden. These aren't villages. These are proto-urban centers processing human cargo alongside furs, amber, silver, walrus ivory, excavations, turnip iron collars. Shackles near the harbor. 4 confirmed at Burka, 6 at Hedeby, 1 at Dublin, though more likely existed and corroded or weren't preserved. Ben Raffield at Uppsala published his findings in Slavery and Abolition in April 2019. The collars match restraints used on humans across history. Neck rings, wrist cuffs, ankle chains. They cluster near wharves, urban centers, not farms. The design is utilitarian, no decoration, pure function. Lock a human, move a human, sell a human. The argument holds. The iron doesn't lie. But here's the part they skip. You don't need a raid to become a thrall. Debt does it too. The Smithsonian Magazine article from August 2020 cites 2 prominent Viking scholars. The slave could own nothing, inherit nothing, leave nothing. Voluntary servitude exists under economic compulsion, debt bondage. A woman steals, she becomes her victim's slave. That's documented in legal texts. A man can't pay what he owes. The law trades his freedom for the sum. Legal texts from medieval Scandinavia confirm it. Certain crimes equal fixed-term thraldom. Murder might get you killed. Theft might get you enslaved. The creditor owns you for a term, 5 years, 10 years, life. It depends on the debt's weight. Some escape through manumission, rare. The Herning runestone tells us Toki the smith earned gold and freedom from Thorgisel Gudmunder's son. 1 case, 1 stone. How many thousands never earned that? The average thrall works until death or until the master tires of feeding them. Once you're property, the master decides everything. When you eat, where you sleep, who touches you, what work you do. Norwegian law from the period specifies owners can punish thralls however they want. Beat them. No legal consequence. Starve them. No penalty. Kill them. Minimal recourse. The thrall's body is the master's resource. If you value documented slavery and Viking history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual. Using sources from the journal Slavery and Abolition, published by Taylor and Francis in April 2019, where archaeologist Ben Raffield from Uppsala University presents the first comprehensive archaeological study of Viking slave markets across the Norse world, including site-specific evidence from Dublin, Hedeby, and Burka dating from 750 to 1050, and from Anna Kjellström's bioarchaeological research at Stockholm University, published in multiple peer-reviewed studies between 2016 and 2025 examining skeletal remains of presumed Viking-era slaves, showing signs of abuse and decapitation in graves across Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. Now back to the information. So a family owes grain, silver, livestock, the debt grows, seasons pass, bad harvest, sick animals. The creditor arrives. What's the payment when you have nothing left? A daughter, your sister, your wife. Sometimes a son, but the sources suggest women more often. The transaction doesn't hit the sagas the way battles do. Legal codes mention it in passing. The debt clears. The woman moves to a new household. She's classified as Thrall. Her children will be thralls. That's the law across Norway, Sweden, Denmark from the 9th through the 11th century. The National Museum of Denmark's historical records confirm it. Slaves were seen as cattle. Advanced domestic animals living in the darkest end of the longhouse with livestock. Norwegian legal language uses neuter gender for slaves. The pronoun is it, ta, not he or she. Masculine for the free, feminine for free women, neuter for thralls. The grammar marks the line between human and property. That's not interpretation. That's documented in the legal language. The Jyskelov from 1241, the Magnus Lagabøtes Landslov from 1274, earlier Norwegian and Swedish codes, they all reflect this. By the time these laws are written, slavery is fading, but the language persists. The terminology shows how deeply the distinction ran. What happens next depends on who owns you. Some work fields, some weave. Female thralls face domestic servitude, cooking, cleaning, childcare, textile production. Archaeological evidence from settlements like Sanda in Sweden shows small houses surrounding a great hall. Researchers interpret this as a plantation model, the great hall for the master, the small structures for thralls. Textile production happening in those small buildings. The labor is gendered. Men cut timber, build ships, row vessels, work heavy agriculture. Women produce cloth, manage households, raise children, both the master's and their own. But the sources don't stop there. Ahmad ibn Fadlan, an Arab lawyer and diplomat sent by the Abbasid Caliph, reaches the Volga Bulgars in 921. He meets the Rus, Swedish-descended Vikings trading along the river routes into Muslim territory. He writes 30 pages describing everything he sees. He calls them the filthiest of Allah's creatures, complains about their hygiene, their customs, but he watches everything. He documents it. The Rus keep slave girls for trade. They have intercourse with them in full view of companions. Public, casual. A merchant enters to buy a slave girl. The owner doesn't pause. Continues. Then negotiates price. Fadlan describes it plainly. Vikings treated their female chattel as sex slaves. The women have no say. They're merchandise with a pulse. When a slave dies, Fadlan writes, they leave him there as food for dogs and birds. No burial, no ritual. The body rots. National Geographic published analysis of the account in December 2015. The translation comes from multiple sources, including James Montgomery's scholarly edition from 2000 and the Cambridge Archaeological Journal's examination of gender and violence from May 2021. Multiple historians cross-reference Fadlan's account. It holds up. The details match other sources, other sites. The bodies back it up. Anna Kjellström, bioarchaeologist at Stockholm University, examined skeletal remains from roughly 10 graves across Norway, Sweden, Denmark, published findings from 2016 onward. These aren't high-status burials. No grave goods. The individuals show signs of abuse, decapitation. In some graves, the skull sits at the foot of the main burial or goes missing entirely. The bones don't reveal malnutrition. Some thralls ate as well as their masters, but blunt trauma, blade marks, beheading before interment. That pattern repeats. Grimstad, southeast Sweden, excavated 1974. 2 decapitated men in one grave, one skull placed at the foot, the other missing. Experts classify them as probable thralls, possibly sacrificed when their owner died. Flakstad in Norway's Lofoten Islands shows the same. Decapitated bodies buried alongside a person of rank, no kinship via DNA. Diet analysis by Elise Naumann at the University of Oslo. Published findings show the accompanying dead subsisted heavily on fish while the master consumed meat and dairy. Lower status food for lower status people. Dublin becomes a nexus by the mid-9th century. Viking raiders establish a long fort, a ship encampment, around 841. The location is strategic, sheltered harbor, river access to the interior, easy approach from the Irish Sea. Historians including Ben Raffield and researchers at Trinity College Dublin argue the settlement's entire developmental trajectory depends on slaving. The Vikings didn't come to farm, they came to raid and trade. Written records from the period confirm raids targeted human cargo as much as silver and livestock. Captives sold at Dublin follow multiple routes. Some move to Moorish Spain via maritime shipping lanes. Arab merchants in Al-Andalus buy European slaves throughout the period. Others transport north to Hedeby or the Breno Islands, then funnel east along the Volga trade route. The route goes like this: Dublin to Hedeby by ship, Hedeby to Birka, then through the Baltic to the Gulf of Finland, overland portage to Lake Ladoga, down the Volkhov River to Novgorod, then south along the Dnieper toward the Black Sea and Byzantium, or southeast along the Volga toward the Caspian Sea. At Bulgar, a major trading city on the Volga, Muslim merchants from the Abbasid Caliphate meet Norse traders. The exchange, furs and slaves for silver dirhams, silk, spices. From Bulgar, caravans move to Khwarazm, then to the Samanid slave markets in Central Asia, finally reaching Baghdad or other centers in the Abbasid Caliphate. Arab silver dirhams recovered at Burqa, Wallen, Dublin, they trace the route backward. Over 60,000 Arab coins documented in Scandinavian hoards. Conservative estimate, many more melted into ingots, jewelry, arm rings. Silk too, the trade flows both ways. People out, luxury goods in. Thousands move through Dublin across 3 centuries, women especially. The Annals of Ulster specify women in multiple raids, 821, a great number of women. Research published in the Taylor and Francis journal Slavery and Abolition by Ben Raffield estimates that 5 of Hedeby's 6 recovered shackles came from harbor excavations, suggesting captives were sold on wharves or directly from ships. No large public markets archaeologically confirmed yet. Maybe private properties, maybe dockside transactions. Either way, the iron collars exist. The harbor context fits. The documentary evidence supports it. Birka on Birko Island in Lake Mellerin serves a similar function. 4 shackles confirmed. The town operates from 750 to 975. Population maybe 700 to 1,000. Small, but connected. Silver hoards from the period include coins from Byzantium, the Abbasid Caliphate, Carolingian Europe. Slaves passed through here heading east. Excavations also turned up groove teeth. 80 male skeletons across Sweden and Norway show deep horizontal cuts across their upper front teeth. Researchers initially theorized warrior status. Anna Kellström found groove teeth on 2 decapitated men buried as slaves in central Sweden. That complicates the warrior theory. Kellström presented her findings at academic conferences, starting 2016, later published in multiple studies. The grooves might mark a broader group, or they might indicate nothing consistent. The bones don't speak clearly on this point. Iceland tells another story. The island settles between 870 and 930. No prior human habitation. Whoever arrives first. The Book of Settlements, Landnama Bach, names prominent founders. But historians estimate 8,000 to 20,000 people actually settled during those 60 years. Most aren't named. Most are thralls, lower status families, workers. DNA studies by Agnar Helgason and colleagues, published in the American Journal of Human Genetics in August 2000, used Y chromosome and mitochondrial DNA from modern Icelanders to trace ancestry. Results: 75 to 80% of Icelandic men descend from Norse males, mostly from Western Norway. The Y chromosome doesn't lie. It passes father to son, unchanged except for mutation. The signal is clear: Norse men, but 62 to 67% of Icelandic women descend from Gaelic stock, Ireland and Scotland. Mitochondrial DNA passes mother to daughter, also unchanged except for mutation. That imbalance means Norse men brought Gaelic women. The ratios don't match natural migration. Voluntary settlement would show more balanced ancestry. This shows capture, raids, slavery. Some might have been wives, voluntary companions. But the sheer scale of the imbalance argues otherwise. You don't get 2/3 Gaelic female ancestry from a handful of marriages. You get it from systematic abduction. A follow-up study in 2018 by Suna Ebenezer's daughter and the Decode genetics team in Reykjavik sequenced ancient genomes from 27 early Icelandic skeletons. Teeth samples, burial sites across the island. Those first settlers split roughly even, 50% Norse, 50% Gaelic, both male and female lines. But modern Icelanders, 70% Norse genes. The Gaelic contribution shrinks over 1,100 years. That's genetic drift, but why does it drift in one direction? Kari Stefansson, Decode's chief executive, suggests repeated famines and epidemics caused loss of genetic diversity, population bottleneck. Some lineages vanish, but there's another explanation. Gaelic-descended Icelanders, many of whom arrived as slaves or children of slaves, faced reproductive disadvantages. Lower status means worse nutrition during famines, means your children die more often, means you have fewer children who survive to reproduce. The DNA shift tracks with subjugation. Science Journal published the findings in June 2018. Irish Times covered it the same month. The genetic signature of slavery persists. You can read it in the chromosomes of living Icelanders. The women taken as slaves left descendants, but those lineages gradually winnowed. The math is cold. The biology doesn't care about justice. It records what happened. Now the funeral. Ibn Fadlan witnesses it firsthand in 922 on the Volga. A Rus chieftain dies. His followers place him in a temporary grave, roof it with wood, bury it. They prepare for 10 days. During that time, They ask his slave girls, who will die with him? One volunteers. She's 15 years old according to some interpretations of the text. Young in any case. Whether the choice is real or coerced, Fadlan can't say. Maybe the alternative is worse. Maybe she believes the afterlife story. Maybe she has no choice at all. The social pressure alone could force the decision. Say no, remain a slave to someone else. Say yes, become elevated for 10 days, then die. For 10 days, she feasts, drinks, sings. She's dressed in fine clothes. 2 young women watch her constantly, accompany her everywhere. Wash her feet with their own hands. The text says they serve her. She's treated as the chieftain's bride for those 10 days, but the surveillance is total. She can't escape. On the 10th day, the ritual begins. They dig up the chieftain, dress him in new clothes prepared during the waiting period. They place him on a ship mounted on a wooden platform on land, a bed with cushions, rich fabrics, imported silks. A feast surrounds him. Meat, mead, fruit, bread, weapons. Then the sacrifices start. They cut a dog in half. Both pieces go into the ship. 2 horses, 2 cows, a rooster, a hen, all animals severed, all pieces placed aboard. The symbolism isn't clear. Fadlan doesn't explain it, maybe doesn't understand it. The girl moves among the men, each tent master, each important man in the group. She enters his tent. He has intercourse with her. He tells her, "Tell your lord I have done this out of love for him." Message for the dead chieftain, delivered through her body. 6 men total, according to the text. She's passed between them. Fadlan writes this plainly. No euphemism. Vikings treated their female chattel as sex slaves. The ritual demands it. The men comply. She has no voice in this. Then they bring her to the ship. They've constructed a wooden frame like a doorway. They lift her up 3 times. Each time she looks over the frame, speaks. Fadlan's interpreter translates. She sees the afterlife. She sees her dead family members. She sees her master seated there. The old woman they call the Angel of Death orchestrates everything. Whether the girl truly sees this, or is reciting a script, or is simply drunk and drugged, Fadlan can't tell. They give her intoxicating drink. She sings. Cup after cup. The Angel of Death urges her to drink more. By the time they lead her to the pavilion on the ship, she's visibly confused. Stumbling, needs her head guided through the entrance. Inside the pavilion, 6 men enter. All have intercourse with her again. Then they lay her beside her master. 2 men hold her feet, 2 hold her hands. The Angel of Death loops a cord around her neck. 2 men pull the ends, strangling her. Simultaneously, the old woman stabs her repeatedly between the ribs with a dagger. Outside, men beat shields with sticks. The sound covers her cries, covers any screaming. When it's done, a naked man approaches with a torch. He lights the ship. Everything burns. The chieftain, the girl, the animals, the goods, the ship itself. The fire consumes it all. Wind picks up. The smoke rises high. The Russ approve. They believe a good wind means the gods accept the offering. When the fire dies, they build a mound over the ashes. They place a wooden post at the top, carve the chieftain's name in runes, then they leave. The chronicler says nothing about the girl's name. Fadlan never learned it. Or if he did, he didn't record it. She's just the slave girl. 15 or 16 or 20? The age isn't certain. The account survives in Arabic manuscripts, translated into English multiple times. The Polish painter Henryk Siemieracki recreated the scene in 1883. The painting circulates widely. Scholars cite Fadlan's account constantly because it's one of the only eyewitness descriptions we have of Viking funeral practices. Human Circus Podcast covered the account in detail in September 2020. Cambridge Archaeological Journal analyzed the gender dynamics, the violence, the question of agency in May 2021. Anthropologists debate whether this was standard practice or an exceptional ritual. The burial evidence suggests it happened, but not necessarily at every high-status funeral. Maybe regional, maybe specific to the Rus on the Volga. Maybe more common than graves reveal. The bodies burn, the evidence vanishes. Only Fadlan's words remain. Back to debt. A woman enters servitude to clear what her family owes. She lives maybe 5 years, maybe 20. She works the fields, the loom, the household. She has no legal standing. Her owner can beat her, sell her, use her sexually, kill her without consequence. Norwegian legal language classifies her as neuter, not a person, an object with breath. If she bears children, they belong to the master by law. If she's sold, she moves wherever the transaction takes her. If her master dies, she might be freed in a will, or she might follow him into the grave, throat cut, body burned. The rune stone from Herning in Jutland reads, Tauki Smith raised the stone in memory of Thorgisel Gudmunder's son, who gave him gold and freedom. Toki was a craftsman. He earned or was granted freedom. That's the exception. Most thralls die as thralls. Some are decapitated, buried without ceremony, skulls separated from bodies. Others just disappear from the record. No stone, no name. No trace beyond perhaps a scattering of disturbed earth that archaeologists never excavate. 3 markets dominate. Dublin processes captives from Irish and British raids. By the mid-9th century, fleets sail out regularly. The Annals of Ulster from 821 mention Etar plundered. A great number of women taken. 907, 3,000 people captured in a single attack. The same annals. Whether those numbers are exact or inflated, the scale is clear. Hedeby sits at the land bridge between the North Sea and the Baltic. Geography makes it a choke point. North-south trade between Frankish lands and Scandinavia. East-west trade between the Baltic and the Atlantic. Population peaks around 1,000. Ibrahim ibn Yaqub visits 965, calls it a very large city at the world's ocean's edge. Life is crowded. Small houses, tight grid. Streets leading to harbor jetties. Goods flow through. Furs, amber, silver, slaves. Shackles concentrate near the waterfront. That's where the transaction happens. Birka, smaller, sits in Lake Mälaren, Sweden, 750 to 975, connected to the eastern routes. Slaves move east into Rus territory, down the Volga, into the Muslim world. Hedeby and Birka both show fortifications by the 10th century. Economic power draws military attention. Defenses go up, silver drives it. The Vikings operate a bullion economy, weighed silver, occasionally gold. Coins circulate but also get melted, turned into ingots, arm rings, jewelry. Arab dirhams flood Scandinavia between 800 and 1,000. Conservative estimates suggest tens of thousands of coins, likely more, since many were melted. Furs, slaves, amber move south and east. Silver, silk, spices move north and west. The slave trade sits at the center. Ibn Haukwal in 977 describes a network across the Mediterranean. Vikings trade captives to Moorish Spain, Byzantium, the Abbasid Caliphate. The routes are documented. The artifacts confirm it. Shackles, coins, burial evidence, legal texts, they all point the same direction. Debt bondage fits into this. A farmer can't pay. The creditor claims a family member. She's classified as thrall, transported to a market, sold, or she stays local, works off the debt. Either way, she's property. The system functions because the law supports it. Scandinavian legal codes from the period, Gragas in Iceland, Giskalav in Denmark, Norwegian laws from the 12th century, mention slavery in passing. By 1241 Denmark's Codex Holmiensis still contains rules regarding slaves, even as the institution fades. Sweden phases out slavery county by county through the 13th century. Final abolition in Västergötland and Värend, 1335, by King Magnus Eriksson. Norway's Magnus Lagabøtes Landslov in 1274 treats slavery as mostly extinct, focusing on freedmen instead. Iceland's Kristina Laga Thatur from 1122 to 1133 is the last Icelandic text mentioning active slavery. Christianity pushes the shift. The church opposes Christians enslaving other Christians. Once Scandinavia converts, the supply shrinks. Economic changes matter too. Renting land to free farmers becomes more profitable than working it with slave labor. The institution dies slowly, unevenly, but by 1300, slavery in Scandinavia mostly ends. But from 800 to 1100, it's everywhere. The woman taken for debt is one thread in a massive system. She's not a warrior, not a merchant, not a free settler. She's currency. She's labor. She's a body moved between hands, across seas, into graves. Her name doesn't survive. Her face doesn't survive. The law treats her as neuter. The sources call her thrall, trell, an unfree servant. If she's lucky, her children or grandchildren might gain freedom. If she's unlucky, she ends up like the girl on the Volga, stabbed and burned because someone decided she should accompany a dead man into the next world. The archaeology doesn't give us her thoughts. It gives us her bones, decapitated, abused, buried without goods, sometimes without a skull. The message in the ground is cold. She was property. She died property. If you value documented research on systems of bondage and Viking exploitation like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work and keep this historical record visible. Also, comment from which city you're hearing this from. Now back to the information. Strontium isotope analysis adds another layer. Kjellström and her team tested skeletal remains from presumed thralls. Strontium gets absorbed from rocks through water and food. builds up in teeth and bones. Different regions have different strontium signatures. The tests show mixed results. Some individuals grew up locally, some came from elsewhere. That fits the picture. Some thralls are born into it, some are captured, some are traded in. The Grimsta grave in southeast Sweden, strontium tests couldn't conclusively determine origin, but the decapitation and burial position scream low status. One skull lies at the foot, the other missing. Why remove it? We don't know. Ritual, humiliation, expedience. The bones don't answer. Flagstad and Lofoten, same pattern. Naumann's dietary isotope work shows fish-heavy diet for the decapitated bodies, meat and dairy for the primary burial. Status, written in collagen, class in bone chemistry. The Isle of Man offers another data point. A wealthy Viking male's tomb, Irish Sea, contains a young female killed by a massive blow to the head. Her remains mixed with cremated animal ashes, not buried with care, thrown in with the beasts. National Geographic's December 2015 article on Viking slavery covers this. The report cites ongoing excavations. Finds from across northern Europe. The pattern holds: violence, degradation, death without dignity. Now the names: a 14th century Icelandic poem, Ríkstula, original likely from the end of the Viking era, lists slave names. The thrall class, Thrall and Thyr. Their sons, Noisy, Fireboy, Stout, Sticky, Bedmate, Bad Breath, Stumpy, Fatty, Sluggish, Grizzled, Stupor, Longlegs. Their daughters, Stumpina, Dumpy, Bulging Calves, Bellows Nose, Shouty, Bondwoman, Great Gossip, Raggedy Hips, Crane Shanks. Every name a slur, every name a marker of contempt. Smithsonian Magazine from August 2020 cites the poem, published in multiple scholarly editions. The names aren't affectionate, they're dehumanizing: Stumpy, Stinker, Lout, Bastard, Sluggard. That's how the free saw the unfree. Objects, burdens, animals. The textile production theory matters here. Neil Price at Uppsala argues that the Vendel period, $550 to $790, sees rapid ship expansion. Long ships need sails, sails need wool. Wool production requires massive land conversion, forest to pasture, sheep to fiber to thread, thread to cloth. One sail could take a single weaver 5 years. Scale that up to fleets of hundreds, thousands of ships. You need labor. Slave labor solves it. Price's hypothesis, covered in National Geographic and multiple academic papers, suggests slavery ramps up precisely when sail production explodes. By the Viking Age, it's systemic. Female thralls work looms, male thralls work fields, cut timber, row ships, build infrastructure. The unfree make the Viking expansion possible. Raids, trade, exploration, all built on captive bodies. So the woman handed over for debt enters this machine. She's not a one-off, she's part of the supply. Maybe she goes to a loom. Maybe she's sold in Dublin, shipped to Hedeby, moved east to the Volga, sold again in Bulgar, transported to the Samanid markets in Khwarezm, ending up in a household in the Abbasid Caliphate. The network reaches that far. Ibn Hawqwal's 977 account says so. Arab merchants buy European slaves, pay in silver, silk. The dirhams recovered in Scandinavian hoards prove the connection. The roots are documented. Slavery and Abolition Journal article from April 2019 lays out the archaeology, shackles, harbor concentrations, settlement structures possibly indicating slave quarters. Sanda in Sweden, excavated in the 1990s, shows a great hall surrounded by small houses. Researchers argue it's a Viking plantation, slave-driven textile production. Price says the implications are clear. We can't know for certain who's working the looms, but the setup matches other known slave-based systems. The Annals of Ulster don't just record 821, 911, or another massive raid, 1034 Dublin under attack, captives taken by rival Norse factions. Slavery isn't just Viking on foreigner. Scandinavians enslave each other. Tor Iverson's doctoral research, published in Norwegian, concludes many thralls came from within Scandinavia. Debt, crime, birth into servitude. The slave trade is internal and external. The woman taken for debt might never leave her home region. Or she might end up on a ship crossing the North Sea, sold to a trader who speaks a different language, moved to a place where she can't understand anyone, worked until her body gives out. The law doesn't protect her. Her owner can beat her to death. No penalty. The phrase Kellstrom uses, they could have been slapped around daily, but that doesn't turn up in the bones. Soft tissue damage, psychological trauma, none of that fossilizes. We get the final violence, the blade, the rope, the blow to the skull. But the years of abuse, those vanish. Laxdela saga mentions Melkorka, an Irish captive sold by a Roos trader at a market near a public assembly in the Breno Islands. She's one of the few named slave women in the sources. Most are just numbers. A great booty of women, 3,000 captured. So many slave girls. The individual disappears into the statistic. Melkorka's story survives because the saga needs her for the plot. Most don't get that. They get a shallow grave, no marker, or they get burned with their master's possessions, or they get thrown into the sea when the voyage goes bad. The sources are thin because slaves are invisible. They don't write, they don't commission stones. When they die, the record often dies with them. Christianity changes it, but slowly. The church sends emissaries north. Ansgar and Rimbert, 9th century, visit Burka and Hedeby, witness slavery. Rimbert's account mentions seeing Christian captives hauled away at Hedeby. A monk in 870, shocked by Christian slaves for sale, sells his possessions, buys their freedom. One incident, hundreds, thousands more slaves remain. The Slavic peoples of Eastern Europe become a primary target because church doctrine forbids Christian on Christian enslavement. Slav becomes slave, the etymology direct. Raids east feed the trade. The Rus, Swedish-descended Vikings in what's now Russia and Ukraine, move Slavic captives down the Dnieper and Volga to Muslim markets. Byzantium also buys. The eastern route is massive, possibly larger than the western. Archaeological evidence is sparse there too. Few shackles recovered in Russia, Ukraine, but written sources are explicit. Ibn Rusta, a Persian traveler, describes how the Rus terrorized Slavs along the Volga, enslaved them, trafficked them to Bukhara. The pattern repeats across the Viking world. And then a grave opens that reframes everything. Sigtuna, Sweden, 1998, St. Lawrence's churchyard. Viking age mass grave, 19 individuals, 11 showing sharp force trauma from bladed weapons. Excavation reveals young males, some with good oral health, no signs of prolonged disease, but with iron shackles around their wrists. The bodies weren't retrieved for individual burial. They were left in the pit. Kellstrom's team conducted mitochondrial DNA analysis, 15 unique profiles, 3 shared, ancestry mixed, some local, some not. The injuries suggest violence. The shackles suggest captivity. Mass graves from the Viking Age are rare. This one sits at a major trading hub. Sigtuna, founded 970 or $980, becomes Sweden's oldest town. Early churchyards hold over 300 excavated graves from 970 to 1100. Some show Christian burial customs, but no church nearby. Graveyards without churches, unique to Scandinavia. The Sigtuna Mass grave stands out, violent end, chained, left together. Were these slaves? Were they executed prisoners? Were they casualties of a raid gone wrong? The evidence suggests low status. The shackles suggest bondage. The burial suggests no one cared enough to separate and honor them. That's the cold truth. When a thrall dies, the death is expedient. If they're useful in the afterlife, they go into the grave, sacrificed. Like the girl on the Volga, like the decapitated men at Grimstad and Flakstad. If they're not useful, they're left for animals. Ibn Fadlan writes it. If a slave died, they leave him there as food for dogs and birds. No ritual, no dignity, expediency. The body rots where it falls, or gets thrown into a pit, or gets burned with trash. The unfree don't earn funerals, but some burials complicate the picture. A few thralls get buried with their masters in ways that suggest they held specialized roles. Advisor, companion. Kellstrom notes, we don't have many graves to go by. Hard to tell if these are common slaves or individuals with unique positions. The bones at Grimstad, for instance, despite the brutal execution, the skeletal remains don't show malnutrition. Some thralls lived relatively well, physically. That doesn't mean they were treated well in life. It means they were fed enough to work. The quality of their existence, their autonomy, their psychological state, none of that survives. We get the end. Sharp force trauma, decapitation, blade marks on vertebrae. That's the punctuation on their lives. And the woman taken for debt? Her story fits this pattern. She might end well fed, working a loom in a large household, or she might end up in a dockside transaction in Dublin, shackled, sold, shipped to a distant land where everything is foreign, worked until her body breaks, buried in an unmarked pit when she's no longer useful. Or she might be chosen to follow her owner into the grave. The system doesn't promise anything. It takes and uses. The sources document the taking. The graves document the using. The archaeology documents the end. Hedeby burns and is abandoned by the mid-11th century. Burka, too, around 975, possibly earlier. Dublin continues as a trading hub, but shifts as Irish and Norse populations integrate, Christianity spreads, political structures change. By 1200, the slave trade is dying across Scandinavia. By 1300, it's mostly dead, at least legally. Former thralls, their children, their grandchildren, they gain freedom, but the stigma lingers. Freedmen have lower legal rights. Compensation for harm done to a freedman is less than for a freeborn person. The stain of unfreedom carries forward. Generations pass before the descendants of thralls fully enter the social fabric as equals, and even then, the memory persists. Thrall is insult. Thrall is warning. Today, the remains speak quietly. Iron shackles in a museum case in Stockholm, Copenhagen, Dublin, strontium signatures in a tooth measured in a university laboratory, blade marks on a cervical vertebra photographed and catalogued, DNA sequences showing Gaelic ancestry in Icelandic women, Norse ancestry in Icelandic men, the imbalance telling the story of who was taken and who did the taking, the graves at Grimstad, Flakstad, the Isle of Man, Sigtuna. They hold the bodies of people whose names we'll never know, whose lives were currency, whose deaths were expedient. The woman taken for dead is one of those bodies. The system that swallowed her is documented in legal texts across Scandinavia. The markets that sold her are excavated, mapped, analyzed. The laws that classified her as neuter, as property rather than person, are preserved in medieval texts. The skeletal evidence of violence done to her entire class is measured and published. And the cold final line in all this extensive research, the one that sits in bone and iron and shallow graves, she was property. She lived property. She died property. The ground holds that truth. The sources confirm it. The archaeology won't let it be forgotten. A recent excavation at Adelsö, Sweden, near Birka, uncovered additional shackles at a royal manor. The proximity to Birka suggests the slave trade operated not just in the market town, but also at elite estates, royal estates. The thralls came through, some stayed, some moved on. The iron says they were restrained. The location says they were valuable enough to guard. The absence of personal grave goods says they were not people. They were assets, economic units, labor measured in output, cloth produced. Fields worked, children born. When the trading system collapsed, when Christianity took hold, when economic models shifted from slave labor to tenant farming, the thralls faded from the record. But the iron remains in museum collections. The bones remain in storage facilities. Labeled and cataloged, the debt that once bought a human life remains in legal texts preserved in archives in Copenhagen, Oslo, Reykjavik, Stockholm. The genetic legacy persists in populations formed by capture and coercion. The woman taken for debt is not a myth. She's a documented reality, repeated across 3 centuries, across 3 countries, across thousands of transactions that left marks in the ground. We're still digging up. That's the story. That's the record. That's what happened when you couldn't pay.